video I'm going to make a Rose Patchouli soap because it's January, come middle of February. This is a great soap to have on hand for giving gifts. It's nice for Valentine's Day or for Mother's Day. It's really a great soap to have any time of year, but I just was kind of in that mindset of what's coming up, what kind of soap am I going to want to be using in a month, because it's going to take that long before the soap is actually ready to use. And also I have these little heart molds, so I thought, so I'll be making the soap in my larger molds and then I'll be cutting them down to size, so I'll walk you through that process, or if you need more information on that, you can go to that other video that I'll link down below. But I have these little heart molds and I thought it would be fun with some of the extra soap to go ahead and pour it in here, to have some little heart-shaped soap. My kids can use them for Valentine's, or it's nice to just put a little set together in like a canvas bag and use those for gifts, whether for family members or someone you want to, bless at church or at school or anything like that. So I thought I would go ahead and make enough soap that I have plenty of bars for our family. I like to have a lot of extra soap on hand to gift to people, or for friends and family who have used our soap for years and love it, and they like to have it in their home as well. So I'll be making a very large batch of rose petals and patchouli soap today. So we have some rose petals, some dried rose petals that will go over the top of the soap. Something that I will cover in this video, which I haven't covered before with soap making, is how to add a colorant. So this is a natural kaolin clay that I'll add as the colorant for the soap. And then I also found some little coarse pink sea salt or Himalayan salt that could be fun to sprinkle over the top of the soap as well, just to make a prettier soap. I will be using a patchouli essential oil along with this wildflower essential oil that has like geranium and jasmine and some of those floral notes to it. I am not a big floral scented person, but I do really love how the floral notes kind of mesh with the patchouli, which is a deeper, richer, earthier scent. So it just pairs really well together. We have coconut oil, olive oil, and shea butter as the base soap recipe, and then also we'll be using lye mixed with water for the lye water to combine all of that together and create the soap. So I have my gloves for safety and safety goggles for when I'm working with the lye, and a temperature gun, because temperature is one of the most important things to keep an eye on when making cold process soap. So the first step, which I've forgotten to set out a goal, the first step is going to be to measure out the water and the lye so that that can begin cooling down while we measure out the oils and start melting those down. So before I begin working with the lye, I will put on my gloves and put on safety goggles. I've talked about this before as well, but anytime you're working with lye, there is a chemical reaction happening. So you want to protect your skin. You also want to make sure that you don't have children and pets running into the area that you're going to be in. There are some strong fumes that come with working with lye, so you don't want them to be breathing that in, or possibly come and knock over a bowl and then they're injuring themselves. So you do want to use lye with caution. Make sure that you have an area set up that's set aside from children and pets, and if you can, set your lye near a window, the lye water, while it's getting to the desired temperature, because you want those fumes to have somewhere to escape. So as long as you're in a well ventilated space, you'll be fine. But just those are some things to keep in mind when working with lye. So since I'm making a large batch, this will probably make about 30 to 40 bars of soap in the end, depending on how much I use in this little, the heart molds. But because it is going to make 30 to 40 bars, and especially if you are new to soap making, I do not recommend making such a large batch for a first batch. I would just play with it, experiment with it, using it in, or making it in much smaller batches first. So I will write out the recipe for a smaller batch as well. That would be great to just start with, or if you're only making maybe a dozen bars just for your own household or for yourself, you probably don't need 40 bars of soap. So I'll make sure to link that up as well. I have my bowl set here on top of the scale, and I will be measuring everything in grams. So I have my scale set to grams. I have tared the scale so that it is not weighing the bowl here. It's tared to 0 right now, and I'm gonna go ahead and start pouring in the water. What did I say I needed? So this is a recipe that I've been making for about 4 years now. So I'm pretty comfortable and confident making it in really large batches. But like I said, I would definitely, if you're new to soap making, I would start small, get comfortable, get confident with that process, and then you can start making bigger batches. We're gonna set that aside. And I'm going to tare my scale. It's set to 0 right now. I like to keep an empty lye container to measure my lye into. So I'm going to set the container here. Combining lye and water, you always want to pour the lye into the water and never the water into the lye. And you're just going to mix that up until it's fully dissolved. So that lye water is 198 degrees currently, and we're wanting it to be between 110 degrees and 130 degrees before we combine it with the oils. So it has quite a bit of time before it's going to cool down to that temperature. All right, now that lye water is set aside, I actually did end up opening up the window, even though it is very cold in here, but just to let some of those fumes out, because working with so much lye, it's pretty strong in here, and my whole family is home today, so just to be on the safe side, I did want to let some of those fumes make their way out of the window there. Now, you don't have to use quite such a large pot. You can use just a very small pot that goes over your stovetop. Because I am making a larger batch, it is nice to have that extra room to work with in here. So when it comes to melting down and combining your oils, I always melt down the solid oils first before adding any liquid oils. So we're going to go ahead and weigh out our solid oils into a pan and get those melting down, and then we'll measure out our liquid oil and add that to it once those have melted down a little bit more. So we're going to start with our, I believe this is coconut oil. And for coconut oil, there's quite a bit of coconut oil in this recipe. I like using the coconut oil because it does really get you a nice hard bar of soap. So hard but moisturizing. The olive oil makes the soap really super moisturizing. So does the shea butter. The coconut oil gives your soap that really firm, hard texture, so it's not just mushy and falling apart in the shower. So I love using coconut oil in these soap recipes. I'm just breaking it apart a little bit here. So we are in the middle of winter and it is definitely hardened up quite a bit. So I am gonna set my scale again to grams. It turned off on me, so I'm just tearing it to 0. There we go. And we'll start adding in that coconut oil. We have reached our measurement for the coconut oil. You can see that's quite a bit of coconut oil. When I'm referring to coconut oil, I did just want to mention that this is a refined coconut oil. So it's organic refined coconut oil, and I will link up the exact one that I use and have been using in all of my soap recipes. But the biggest thing is to use a refined coconut oil because it's not going to have that coconut scent. So a refined coconut oil typically has a pretty high heat point when it comes to cooking and things like that, but it's also not going to have that coconut scent or flavor, which doesn't matter in a soap as far as the flavor goes, but the scent is, when it's refined, it doesn't have that coconutty scent. So I like to use it in soap. And now we'll go ahead and weigh out the shea butter, and I'll also link that up for you as well. Same with the shea butter. I do use a naturally refined shea butter. It is an organic shea butter, and I like to use the refined version of a shea butter for the same reason. It won't have that nutty scent to it that you would get with an unrefined oil or butter in this case. So with the shea butter, there's a lot less of the shea butter. This is really for the moisture in the soap. It's going to be really nourishing, moisturizing, and hydrating with this shea butter added in. And so with that being the main purpose of it, there's not as much shea butter as there is coconut oil. Almost there. More. My pot is covering up the scale, so it's hard to see. There we go. All right. So we are going to put these solid oils onto the scale, the heat source. So in this case, I have an electric burner here, and I'm going to set that to a low temperature. We don't want to bring the heat up too high on our oils because we don't want to burn them. We don't want them to bubble and boil. The purpose is just to get them melted down to where they are a liquid form. So I'm just going to set that on the heat source on a low setting and wait for it to melt down at this point. And we'll go ahead and measure out the olive oil so that once that solid oil is fully melted, we'll add in the olive oil, the liquid oil. And I keep these buckets, once they're empty, I like to keep them around so that I can use them for measuring oils, which I have them set right over here on the counter. And you can use any kitchen supplies that you have for measuring out your oils. I just like to keep these buckets around to measure out my olive oil. All right, let's see, 1200. All right, bit of this. The pumice olive oil is really great in soap making, so that's what I'm using here. So I'm just gonna have this set aside while the solid oils are melted down. While those oils are melting down, while we're waiting on the lye water to cool, I will measure out the essential oils that we're gonna add into the recipe at the end, and I will show you how to add this colorant. Actually, first, let's just start off with measuring out our essential oils. So for this recipe, I really want it to be heavier on the patchouli and then just some notes of that floral, the floral scents. So when I say floral, I'm referring to the geranium and the jasmine in this wildflower essential oil blend. And this is just straight patchouli essential oil. Let's see my notes on the recipe here and see how much we want to put in there. Take out these little stoppers when I'm using it for soap making. It smells so good already. Yeah, so it just, it has just the nicest subtle floral scent with just a really rich, kind of woodsy, earthy scent. So while it is, you know, going to be this pretty pink bar of soap, it really has just a nice, subtle earthiness to it that I really love. I found that people love patchouli or they really don't like it at all. I'm someone who really loves patchouli, which was kind of the inspiration. I hadn't ever seen patchouli and florals come together in a pink soap before, but just kind of playing around with it. It's where I landed because again, like I said, I wanted a nice feminine kind of floral soap, but I didn't want it to be too heavy on the floral notes that it just was too sweet or too fragrant on the floral side. So that's where the patchouli really balances that out. All right, so now that we have our essential oils measured out and we're gonna just leave those set aside, let's go ahead and mix up that clay. So I'm gonna grab a little bit of water because I didn't bring my water over here. All right, I realized I had water still left over from mixing up that lye water. So I'm gonna measure right into this mason jar here. And actually, I don't even need my scale for this, because I'm going to do it in teaspoons and tablespoons, and we're gonna mix the clay and the water together and whisk it up. Now, mixing it here, it's going to be darker than when it's distributed into the entire soap batch. So you really wanna keep that in mind, that whatever color you're seeing when you mix up your clay is not necessarily what the final result is going to be. It's going to end up lighter because it's being distributed throughout the soap. So in the soap batter, it's going to be a lighter color than what you're mixing up here in the jar. So we're going to start off mixing up your lye and mixing up your lye water, your solid oils, your melted oils. It's very important to get very precise measurements because that is your soap. That is the soap base, and if you do not get those measurements right, it can actually affect the final result of the soap. You can end up with too soft of a bar, it not solidifying properly. When it comes to the additives in soap, which are going to be anything that you use after you have mixed up your soap batter, so exfoliants or essential oils, things like that, you have a little bit more room with the measurements. I'll give you the exact measurements in the notes down below. This is really just added for the color. but there are some benefits. So everything that I put into soap, I like for it to serve a purpose in the soap. And with anytime you add in a kaolin clay to your soap, it's actually really good at extracting impurities. This is what like facial masks are made out of. If you ever, go to a spa and put on a facial mask or something, that it oftentimes has a clay in it that creates that, and can just be used sometimes for cleansing on its own. So it is really good for that purpose, to extract impurities, and really it does add to the cleansing power of the soap. But we're using it today mostly because it also makes for a really pretty pink soap. And again, I find it best when you're starting out to stick to a recipe exactly, and then once you have some experience under your belt of making soap, you can really play around with these things a little bit. If patchouli or any of these floral soap or essential oils are not really your jam, then I say use one that is. So if you really love, say, chamomile essential oil or lavender essential oil, or just geranium on its own, if you love a floral scent, then maybe take out the patchouli and just do all floral scents, jasmine or geranium or something like that. Or you could just leave this soap unscented if you wanted to. But again, in the beginning, I would definitely, if you're just starting out in soap making, follow some recipes exactly, and then you'll get some experience on the process, and then from there you can start experimenting with things like additives, like clays and colorants and essential oils and things that you might want to put on the top to make a pretty soap top, or add in an exfoliant to this soap. This will not have an exfoliant in it. It will just be a creamy, rich lather soap. It won't have anything in it that gives it that grit. It's not going to have any grit to it. It's going to be a smooth soap bar. And you want to make sure that clay and water is mixed up really well, because you don't want any chunks of clay left in there. So let that sit there with the essential oil until we're ready to add it to the soap. I'm going to leave the whisk in it because right before pouring it in and adding it into the soap, I do like to just give it another final stir, because if any of that clay does fall to the bottom, I can just mix it back up in there before adding it into my soap recipe. Another thing to have available to you as well is a mesh strainer. So I will run this through a mesh strainer when I add it, so that if there is any clay that didn't fully dissolve into that water, the mesh strainer will catch that. A little sip of coffee. That actually reminds me that about, let's see, it was probably a week or two before Thanksgiving, I made up a big batch of coffee soap, which I make usually about that time every year. It's a big just hit. It's a family favorite. It's a favorite of friends and people who have purchased that soap in the past. So I made a large batch of that. I recorded the entire process for you, but the mistake I made is that I wasn't talking to the camera like I'm doing in this video. I was just recording the process, and then thought I would go ahead and make the video and explain the process after the fact. Well, I lost my voice over Thanksgiving, and it took several weeks for it to come back, and I had made that soap specifically for Christmas time, for gift giving, because I know that it's a favorite. So if you're interested in a coffee soap recipe or video, let me know in the comments down below, and I will definitely still post that video for you, and I will just give a voiceover instructions so that you can see the process of making a coffee soap. I use coffee as the exfoliant in that recipe, and it's just a favorite. We still have some of it going in our shower right now, and we still have a couple bars left to get us through until our next batch of soap is ready. But I would love to share that recipe with you and share that process with you if you're interested in making a coffee soap. Let's see where those oils are at. Those solid oils are fully melted. So we're gonna go ahead and add in the liquid oils. We're actually just gonna take it off the heat for this. Take it off the burner, turn that off, and we'll add in the liquid oil. I'm gonna clear this area of the seal and the burner and some of these items that we're not gonna need anymore now that everything has been measured out, and the next step is going to be to combine the oils with the lye water. All right, so that lye water is reading at 116 degrees, and our melted oil, so the solid oil, the coconut oil, shea butter, and olive oil, that is all at 106 degrees. So we are within 10 degrees of each other, right in that window that we want to be in. So now we're gonna go ahead, before we combine the lye water with the oils, we're gonna go ahead and add in the clay for the colorant. We're gonna add that to the melted oils before we add in the lye. So I'm just gonna mix that up to make sure the clay has fully dissolved into the water before I pour it in. And we're also going to pour it in through a mesh strainer so that if there is any clay that is undissolved, that strainer will catch it. Now that we're going to be pouring that lye in, I'm going to put back on my gloves and my safety goggles just in case any of that were to splash up onto the skin. And the same way that we poured the clay into the oils, we're going to do the same thing with the lye water, where we're going to pour it through a mesh strainer so that if there is any undissolved lye in the lye water, the strainer will catch that and it won't make its way into the soap. Now that we have poured the lye water into the melted oils, you're gonna use your stick blender and you're gonna give the batter just 3 short bursts. And then you're gonna mix it with the stick blender. And the goal here is to bring your soap batter to trace. And what that means is that when you lift your stick blender out of the batter, you're going to see a light trace at the top of the batter. You're just going to continue that with the 3 short bursts. This process could take up to 10 minutes. You really want it to come to trace within 10 minutes of starting. So you're going to give it 3 short bursts, and then you're just going to mix it with your stick blender and so on until your soap batter reaches trace. All right, now that that soap batter has reached trace, we can add in the essential oils. And we're not going to use the stick blender again. We're going to whisk the essential oils in. Also, if you were adding any exfoliants to your soap, you would also add those in at this time. We're not adding in anything else aside from that essential oil. This is going to be a nice, smooth, creamy soap. So we're just going to whisk that in and make sure it's mixed in fully, probably for 1 to 2 minutes. But we do want to work quickly at this point to get the soap batter into the molds before the soap begins to solidify. To put it into this smaller mold, I'm going to use a measuring cup rather than try to pour it. Now for this smaller mold, I'm just going to pick it up and tap it back down gently so that we can give the bottom of these little heart soaps a nice smooth soap bottom, and then also just to eliminate any bubbles that may have formed in there. Whoop. Right. Now we're going to pick up this big batch and pour it into these bigger soap molds. Now that you've poured the soap into the molds, you're going to do the same thing. You're just going to pick them up and tap them down to eliminate any bubbles. And then I like to use a butter knife to make a pretty soap top. You can use a silicone spatula, a spoon, a fork, whatever utensil that you want to try to make a pretty soap top. These are really at a great consistency for leaving a little bit of design on the top. They've started thickening up just enough to where they'll stay in place. So you'll notice if your soap is too wet, you're not going to be able to really get a nice pretty design on the top of it. And you could just play around with it and see what kind of soap top you like. So some of them I like to just leave flat. I'm just playing around and making a few different designs in these today. And I'll show you a close-up of each one. And now when it comes to using these rose petals, these dried rose petals on the soap tops, I like to crunch them up a little bit with my fingers before I add it. I don't want anything too big on the top of the soap because whatever's on that soap is going to end up going down the drain in the tub. So I'm just gonna sprinkle, now that I've sprinkled on a few of those dried rose petals, I'm gonna use some of this coarse pink salt just for a little extra. Kind of gives it a nice little sparkle. All right, now that we have our soap tops just how we want them, we will cover these molds with a towel to insulate the soap. You're gonna leave that towel on and let your soap set in the molds for about 24 hours so they can harden up before you remove them from the molds. Set this one aside and we're just gonna cover that with a towel. I like to do a few layers if I'm using these thinner towels. And we'll just let those set for 24 hours and then I will show you how to remove them from the molds and cut them. It is a new day and it's been about 24 hours since we poured the soap into the mold. So we'll start by removing the hearts from their mold first. And these soaps turned out just the perfect pink color that I was going for, kind of a soft rosy blush pink. It's kind of a chalky pink color. And they're popping out really nicely. They're not too soft. If you wait 24 hours, they're usually good to go. If you find that they're still a little bit too soft, just wait another 24 hours and check them again the next day and they should harden up and be ready to remove, usually within 24 to 48 hours. Like this one here, just has a little bit of an edge that you can scrape off pretty easily with your fingers. Just kind of mold it to get off any excess soap. All right, so we've removed the hearts from the molds and they turned out just as I was hoping they would, just a perfect little heart to give as a gift for this time of year. Going into Valentine's Day, they'll make sweet little Valentines, or they're great just to put in a little gift bag for even Mother's Day coming up in the spring. And then with these bigger bars, you're just gonna first take the silicone out of its soap box and peel away the sides. And your bar should be nice and firm, not warm to the touch, not too soft that you can't handle it well. So again, if you find that it's too soft when you remove it from the box, just wait another 24 hours and it should harden up for you. So now for cutting these larger loaves, I'm actually going to be using this little mold that my husband made for me, but what you could do is just use your soap cutting tool, and I've done that in the past where I will just, if you want them to be even, exactly even, you can take a ruler and then just gently press on the side of the bar to score the soap first before you begin cutting it, and then you'll just want to make sure that you're cutting straight down so that you have a nice even cut on your soap bar. You can find similar ones online, and I will link up one that's very similar to this one.
Your soap bars will take about 4 to 5 weeks to fully cure. So here in about 28 days, you'll want to check them. You'll notice right now the soap bars are still slightly soft to the touch. Once they're fully cured and ready to use, they will have firmed up and be a much harder bar. Until then, you'll want to set your soap bars aside somewhere where they can be undisturbed while they're curing, and you'll also want to make sure they'll receive plenty of airflow, so you'll want to space them out just a little bit. Thanks for hanging out with me while I make soap today. I hope that you enjoy this soap as much as our family does. If you have any questions about this soap or cold process soap making in general, please leave your questions in the comments below.